Welcome to Roll for Insight, the D&D podcast where we dive into the game, the lore, and the internet's favorite arguments. Grab your dice and your character sheet, and let's roll for insight. Hello, welcome back to Roll for Insight. In this episode, we're wrapping up our deep dive into all of the 2024 Player's Handbook Origin Feats. We've done individual breakdowns on each one, so if you want the full mechanical deep dive, clarifications, internet debates, and historical context, make sure to check out those episodes as well. Today, we're zooming out. We're going to be talking about what patterns show up across all the Origin Feats. We'll talk about which feats are table dependent and why. We'll take a view on which scale well into the higher tiers of play, and how you should actually think about choosing your Origin feat. Alright, so first off, big design patterns in the 2024 Origin Feats. So after reviewing all of them, there's a pretty clear design philosophy here, and it's reliability over the explosion of power. So very few Origin Feats are designed to dramatically spike your power. Instead, most of them do things like smooth out your bad rolls like the Lucky feat, or increase your durability like the Tough feat. They give you more options like Healer or Magic Initiate, or they can help fill gaps in the party like the Skilled feat. Now, these feats aren't going to let you dominate encounters, but they do open up options for you, especially in the early game when you don't have that many options. Now, some of the Origin feats are nearly universal, and others really depend heavily on how your table actually runs the game. So some of the highly table-dependent feats include things like the Crafter feat. So Crafter depends on whether your DM tracks inventory and whether gold really matters in your campaign, and whether downtime or logistics come up often. So if your table hand waves away things like equipment and shopping, the 20% discount you get from Crafter barely matters. And if your DM never pressures resources at the table, then things like fast crafting becomes more about flavor if you even end up using it at all. So Crafter shines in really survival-heavy and resource-conscious campaigns. Now, Musician also really depends on the table that you're playing at, because Musician depends entirely on how your table uses heroic inspiration. So some tables never use it or don't even allow it, and some tables hand it out constantly. So then Musician can feel underwhelming in both of those extremes. But at tables where inspiration is a meaningful and limited resource, then Musician becomes extremely reliable, as you have a way to constantly generate inspiration for your party. Now, the Skilled feat can also be very table dependent because of how often skills and tools actually matter. So some campaigns where Skilled is going to be an excellent choice is where the DM calls for a variety of skill checks, or even the lesser used ones, or if exploration and logistics is handled in a really meaningful way, and social scenes aren't run through one person, or if you have some major gaps in the party's skill set and you want to round out your team. However, if there's only one face character who handles all the social roles, and you don't really have to diversify or split skills among the party, or if tools are just something that's not really ever used, then Skilled isn't going to have a chance to stand out properly. So Skilled increases how often you get to say, I can roll for that to help the party. Now, on the other side of the very table-dependent feats, we have the universally applicable feats. So that would be things like Lucky and Tough and Alert. So these ones function in almost any campaign because combat and damage always happen, and initiative is always going to matter, and the dice don't always do what we want them to do. So these feats interact directly with the core mechanics that appear at almost every table. Now, breaking these feats down, looking at combat and utility focuses, it's also helpful to group them up by what pillar of play they support. So looking at the primarily combat-focused feats, we've got things like Alert, so that changes initiative order, and that can completely reshape the combat flow. Then you have feats like Savage Attacker, which improves damage consistency on your hits. Tavern Brawler can improve the unarmed combat, but it also gives you battlefield positioning options. And then Tough directly increases the survivability of the team. So these feats all operate inside the combat math side of things. Some of the more support and resource-focused feats are going to be Healer, because you can convert hit dice into in-combat healing. The Musician feat gives you inspiration across the entire party to use. And then Lucky can modify your rolls and can help land the important ones. So those ones tend to act as buffers against failure for the entire group. And then looking at the utility and the jack-of-all-trades style of feat, We've got Crafter, which gives you lots of logistical solutions. Magic Initiate gives you a lot more magical versatility without committing to the multi-classing. And then the Skilled feat gives you more coverage of skills and tools. So these ones are about expanding your options and problem solving. Now, looking at some of the feats that scale really well with levels, there's a few that are based off of scaling with proficiency bonus. So Lucky, Healer, Musician, and Alert all grow in how often you can use them and how many characters you can affect as you level up. Then there's other feats that are going to be stronger in the early game, like Savage Attacker and Tavern Brawler, because at the early stages of the game, the weapon dice matter a lot more before all the extra damage riders accumulate. And then battlefield positioning sometimes matters more when hit point pools are smaller. And then some of the feats are stable throughout, like Tough because hit points always matter, and Skilled, proficiency is always going to be relevant. Again, depending on your campaign. Now, the outlier to this is Magic Initiate, because the scaling depends entirely on the spell choices and the slot access. But it's also quite strong since you have the option to trade out spells now too in 2024. Now, in each individual episode, we talked about a lot of the internet discussion boards and the internet reputation that comes along with each of the Origin feats. Now, believe it or not, the internet does have some pretty extreme opinions on pretty much every single feat, but there's a difference between the internet reputation and the reality. So a couple that are frequently called overpowered are the Lucky and the Alert feats. However, with the 2024 update, both of them are now resource limited and they don't break bounded accuracy. So 5.5 has done a good job to scale them back a little bit. The ones that frequently get called boring are the ones like Tough, that you get a flat increase to your hit point, and Skilled, because you just get more skill and tool proficiencies, and even Savage Attacker, because it's just a simple, modest damage increase. But boring often just means that it's predictable, it's consistent, and it's not flashy, and sometimes that can actually be a huge strength to your character. The ones that we see as being the most misunderstood would fall into the Healer category because of the debates over the efficiency of healing at all, and Musician, since tables handle inspiration differently, and Crafter because that has a lot of DM dependency, and you may think you want to play a certain style, but whether that works in practice with the table, you might have to wait and see. So a lot of the online arguments just stem from people playing very different styles of campaigns, and that's fine, so it's important to have a session 0 to sort out those details if you're not sure. Now, the big question that you should be asking is choosing the right Origin feat. So instead of asking which is the strongest, that doesn't really get to the heart of the issue here. You have to ask questions like, does my DM track resources? Do we run multiple encounters per day? What do the rests typically look like? Does inspiration matter, and is it given out frequently or not at all? Is combat going to be deadly for our party? And does our party lack a role? Do we need to fill a gap? Because Origin feats really aren't about the min-maxing. You need to see how it's going to fit with your specific campaign. Now, after breaking down all of these feats individually, and now together, none of the Origin feats in 5.5 are wildly broken, but none of them are completely useless. All of them depend on context and table play. So it makes the 2024 design philosophy pretty clear that early feats are all about expanding your reliability and your options. And if you want the deep mechanical breakdown of any specific feat, then check out the individual episodes in this series. But hopefully this wrap-up helps you see the bigger design picture and make better choices for your own table. Well, that's it for this session of Roll for Insight. Thanks for listening, and thank you to all our supporters on patreon.com/rollforinsightpodcast. And we will see you next time.